One of the issues mentioned, as I said, is the importance of a global legal framework to combat wildlife crime effectively. The next guest has made it his ambition and his mission, I should say, to achieve just that. A warm welcome to you, John Scandon. How are you?
Great. Lovely to be here. Thanks very much.
Great to have you on board. Let me introduce you. You are chair of a new global initiative called the Global Initiative to End Wildlife Crime. Now that sounds like a whole mouthful. What is it you are really working on and hoping to achieve in one sentence, and then we can elaborate?
Thanks, Annelies. Well, we were created just about a year ago. We are a broad coalition of organisations and individuals from across every continent with many different views on many different things, but we all converge on the fact that our international legal framework as it deals with wildlife trade and wildlife crime is currently inadequate for addressing biodiversity loss, climate change, and the outbreak of future wildlife-related pandemics. It's not fit for purpose, it needs to be changed, and that's what we're advocating for.
So what are the gaps exactly? What's lacking?
So there are gaps in two respects. There are gaps on the wildlife trade side, and there are gaps on the wildlife crime side. Looking first at wildlife trade, we know that pandemics can emerge from wildlife. We have all of the scientific evidence that is available to us. I won't go through that today, but the IPBES and many others have shown the links between how we interact with wildlife and the risk of future pandemics. At the moment, we have a 50-year-old framework for regulating wildlife trade, known as CITES, that's the acronym for the convention that regulates wildlife trade. And it only looks at wildlife trade from the perspective of biodiversity conservation. It looks to see whether any trade in a wild animal or plant will negatively impact the survival of that animal or plant at its source. It takes no account of the risk to public health or animal health of that trade. Now, that was fine 50 years ago, before we had all the science and all the evidence we have about the risk of wildlife trade in terms of public health and animal health. It's no longer fit for purpose. We need a wildlife trade regime at international level that takes a One Health approach. It brings together biodiversity conservation, public health, and animal health all together, so we make a decision based upon biodiversity, public health, and animal health all at the same time.
Okay.
Wildlife, yes.
Yeah, to realize that, you are looking at the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, UNCTOC. You want to create a fourth protocol. Why would that be the way to go? What does that offer?
On the wildlife trade side, we need to amend the wildlife trade laws or look to the new proposal for an international pandemics treaty. On the wildlife crime side, we have no global agreement on wildlife crime. In the last session, you've heard about the severe consequences of wildlife crime in terms of biodiversity loss, impacts on climate change, risk of pandemics, impacts on local communities, risk to security, etc. Despite all of those risks, and despite the fact that the full cost of these wildlife crimes are valued at somewhere between $1 and $2 trillion a year, according to the World Bank. When you look at the impact on ecosystems, their ability to sequester carbon, we have no wildlife crime agreement. What we are proposing, exactly what you just said, we need to work within the existing framework, that's the UN Convention Against Transnational Organised Crime. It has 3 current protocols on human trafficking, migrant smuggling, and firearms trafficking. We need a 4th protocol on wildlife trafficking to elevate this issue to the level that it deserves to be at, so that we can take a global coordinated approach to both combating and preventing wildlife crime, which will benefit biodiversity, climate, help prevent pandemics, and support local communities be the beneficiaries of their wildlife and not transnational organised criminals.
It sounds like a very sound plan. Have you gathered any support yet? And for example, the EU, have they already pledged to this idea?
Yeah, on the wildlife crime side and looking at this protocol, we've garnered good support. I'm delighted to say that on May the 17th, the President of Costa Rica, President Quesada, and the President of Gabon, President Ondimba, announced through a joint statement their support for a fourth protocol under the UN Convention Against Transnational Organised Crime on Wildlife Trafficking. They've called for support from other states to commence a negotiating process under the UN Convention to create this fourth protocol. And I'm also thrilled that the European Commission, in a recent document on addressing transnational organised crime, also expressed its support for a protocol recognising the need to take much stronger action and having a stronger global framework for addressing wildlife crime. So we're off to a good start. We need more states. We're engaging with many states, including European Union member states, and we're looking forward to this generating great momentum and fulfilling the objective of the presidents of Costa Rica and Gabon to have a fourth protocol on illicit wildlife trafficking. And to quote them, they said because it should be local communities and national budgets that should benefit from a country's wildlife, its fauna and its flora, and not transnational organised criminal gangs.
Why would a country not want to help establish this fourth protocol of UNCTOC?
Annalise, that's a great question. Why would anybody not go with this? Look, it's a great idea. Its time has come. We've had 4 resolutions of the UN General Assembly on tackling illicit wildlife trafficking, all supported by the European Union. The engine room behind them was a joint group chaired by Gabon and Germany in New York. So we've had those 4 resolutions. There's been lots of work done, but we're still not turning the corner on stopping wildlife crime, stopping illicit wildlife trafficking. We've made progress, but haven't gone far enough. Your last session made that very clear. We need to take this to the next level. We need to embed this into the international criminal law framework, which is where it belongs. The consequences of wildlife trafficking for biodiversity, climate, public health, animal health, security, livelihoods are so severe that we need to elevate this, give it a protocol, create a global agreed framework on how we can combat and prevent. We're hopeful that not just the European Commission, but the individual European Union member states will also come out and express themselves supporting this protocol, supporting the presidents of Costa Rica and Gabon, 2 biodiverse rich countries, and get behind and build momentum for this new protocol.
You sound very passionate, and Laurentine just in the previous session asked about the participants' frustration. Now I can imagine that a frustration that you might experience from time to time is that people in Europe, for example, feel that it has nothing really to do with them, all this wildlife trafficking problem. Is that how you think people feel here? Do you experience that at all? And what can be done to change that?
Well, I'm fortunate. I have European heritage. I have a British father and a Swedish mother. I've spent a lot of time in Europe. I do think that Europeans get it. Perhaps they don't get it in the same way that people that are living in source countries that are being affected by illicit wildlife trafficking do. But I do think that they get it. The European Union is a destination state, both destination and transit state. The UN Convention, the UN Office of Drugs and Crime, 2 reports from 2016 and 2020 make that clear. This is a global issue. The European Union has been a really strong supporter of the resolutions in the General Assembly. They've given a lot of funding to this. They've supported the International Consortium on Combating Wildlife Crime. So I've been very supportive and very thankful to the European Union for what it's done. We now need to take it to the next level. We have all the information now we didn't previously have about the biodiversity impacts, climate impacts, public health impacts, etc. We now have such a body of evidence that this has to be brought to an end, that we need to go to the next logical step and have this international agreement, really step it up and turn the corner with this. And I'm grateful to the European Union and I'm hopeful that they'll come fully on board, both collectively and individually. It's also part of raising awareness amongst European Union citizens as well. Although, I reckon overall I've been pretty happy with the way the European Union has responded.
Okay, and this passionate plea, I'm sure, will call into action many of the participants and the viewers right now taking part in this EDD 21 session in Studio 2. Thank you so much, John Scanlon. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for being our guest here this afternoon, and good luck. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a very, very short break. Don't go anywhere. That is to say, you can stretch your legs, get a cup of coffee, run around a table, or maybe, who knows, go onto the EDD platform, send a message to someone you want to connect with, network with. That's of course possible, or maybe browse the program and check out what sessions that you have not been able to participate in or watch yet you want to pick up on later, because everything of course is recorded. We're not going anywhere. See you in a while.